you're a fan of the Beatles now, obviously. You own their albums. What did you think hearing their live stuff versus their studio stuff?
Well, one of the things that interested me about their studio stuff, especially with George Martin, like I mean, when I was going to college, I was really interested in new music, avant-garde music, and a lot of the things that he was doing were tape techniques that some of the avant-garde composers were using. You know, like playing things backwards and slowing things down and speeding them up, and so George Martin, to me, was almost like a musique concrète.
That's a new word. What's that? What does that mean?
Musique concrète is where you go out and you pick up live sounds, real sounds, and then you record them, and you in the old days you actually on a splicing block. You splice the tape together, and you can put it forwards and backwards, alternate bits of forwards and backwards and stuff. It was all real live acoustic sounds that you weren't doing specifically for yourself. So for me, that's a lot of what he did. I mean, the Beatles produced sounds, and then he manipulated them, or would bring in outside sounds of, crowds and different things.
Well, yeah, especially as their albums progressed.
And that's when I got more interested.
In the band?
In the band.
Interesting.
Because...
So you weren't necessarily a fan when you saw them?
No.
You were more interested in this classical stuff, ballet, but then as soon as you heard some of their later output, do you remember exactly what album really caught your attention, or a single?
Well, the thing that I liked, which the very first electronic album that I know of was by Morton Subotnick, and it was called Several Apples of the Moon. And it was really meant to be performed in your living room on the record. And it was two parts. There was side one and side two. And if I'm remembering right, now you know about the history more, but Sgt. Pepper's was like a story. I mean, the order of the songs on the album were meant to be listened to in that order.
Of course,
so it wasn't just a bunch of singles stuck together, and now here's an album. And so that's the one that really got me. I mean, I thought that was really mind-blowing. And to me, it was right in the same area of some of the music that was quote-unquote classical or whatever. I mean, they were really, I think that was George Martin. But then when they started, especially George Harrison, when he got involved with the sitar and non-Western music, got involved with what they were doing. I mean, that putting things together like that is something that Western composers were doing, is using other instruments and new sounds, and having non-orchestral instruments in the orchestra.
Right.
And so to me, that's what I started to connect the Beatles and what they were doing, but in the studio, because to me they were studio things. And of course, the music that I'm talking about, the musique concrète, is only in this. You can't perform it live.
Right.
I mean, it's the final.
I mean, I think the best example of that would be Revolution 9 off the White Album, which is just purely snippets of sound and wholly created in a studio environment.
And my daughter once asked me what my favorite album was. And I know it's not popular, but it's the White Album.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I really thought that was their most experimental, and really enjoyed what they did, and didn't but didn't each Beatles sort of have their own little section of that album?
I don't know if you call it a section, but they definitely had their own songs.
I enjoyed that you could actually meet the other members.
Oh yeah, I never thought of that.
And to hear what they were thinking and doing. To me, George Harrison, when I first saw him, just really looked, in terms of words in those days, just really looked deep to me. And I just thought, there's got to be a lot in there.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever it is. So I was really curious to hear his music. And then when he did have some of his own music and his own songs, I really appreciated them.
Yeah, a lot of my favorite Beatles songs are his compositions.
I really think the Beatles, in my idea, became an avant-garde group. Especially when they were because the stuff that they were doing on their studio albums, they couldn't perform live.
Well, yeah, and I think they were also given that freedom, knowing that they had stopped. They were done touring. And I think that helped shape what they were going to do in the studio, because now they had, well, we don't have to worry about going on tour.
For me as a musician, like I said, looking back at their music and the stuff that they did, I mean, it was, even in teaching, people used to ask me who is the greatest composer. And I used to use Lennon and McCartney and compare it to Bach. I said, how do you compare Lennon and McCartney to Bach? But yet, in our time as composers, Lennon and McCartney are really important. What boggles my mind is the stuff that Paul McCartney has done since the Beatles. If he had never been in the Beatles,
oh right, yeah,
is quite a catalog of work.
Yeah, even just with Wings.
Yeah, and he would be well known for that. And I even learned to appreciate Ringo more as a drummer. Because when I first heard,
me too.
When I first heard them, I really thought he was the weak part of the.
Yeah, but you watch this film and you realize he probably kept them all together for as long as they stayed together, because he just sort of had this happy-go-lucky attitude and had these sort of funny sayings that sort of could bring down the tension. And that's what I realized, like, he was vitally important. Yeah, for a long time I was the same way, where I was like, Ringo. But then you realize, no, he was very integral. Even if he didn't contribute a lot of writing, he really helped keep that band together in my mind. So Stan, you went to SF State.
Right.
You studied music, composing, or
composition.
Composition, and then where did you end up from there? Kind of give us the cliff notes of your musical career.
From there, I went to California Institute of the Arts when it first opened in 1970.
And that's down here in the LA area.
Right.
Okay.
They call it Valencia.
And that's where that's the Disney school, right?
Right.
That's where Tim Burton went.
And
okay.
And Ed Harris.
Oh, really?
Went there, and Pee Wee Herman.
Wow. Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens.
I didn't know that.
Paul Rubens and Ed Harris were there when I was there.
Okay. And then what did you do there?
Well, I was really interested in filmmaking and music for film.
Okay.
So I made 3 films while I went there for my MFA.
Yeah.
And which is 2 years, and I made 3 films of my own, and then I don't know how many films I scored. I did the music for a lot of films. In fact, I did the music for a film that Paul Rubens made as Paul Rubens, not as Pee Wee Herman.
Wow.
And that was the best 2 years of my life. I mean, that was just an incredible
Until
place.
you met me.
Until I met you.
Yeah, of course. What am I saying?
And then after that, I got involved. I mean, I did some music, but what I got more known for, today they call it sound design. But when I was doing it, there was no name for it.
Really?
So I did some of the first synthesized sound effects for some films and TV.
What kind of instruments did you use for that?
I used synthesizers. I used a Buchla.
Okay.
Buchla 100 and 200, and Surge modular synth, and then I had a Moog modular synthesizer. It was all modular stuff.
And then I think you told me this, but you actually got to mess around on it's on a tape.
The Orchestron and the
Mellotron.
Mellotron.
So you got to mess around with those too?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you could even make your own tapes and put them on there. It's a good way to do sound effects.
Oh, wow.
Because you can record it. They used to use those for laugh tracks.
Really?
Because they'd have different kinds of laughs and stuff, and somebody would sit back in the live shows and push. They'd know what key to put. I mean, the regular piano kind of keyboard.
Yeah, of course.
But they would know which key would have a chuckle and a big laugh and all that.
So you did some films, and then sound design. Anything that we might have seen? Do you recall?
The first thing I did was a movie by Dalton Trumbo called Johnny Got His Gun. They needed Jesus to scream. Jesus is in the movie, and they needed who is played by Donald Sutherland, and they needed a scream that was, I forget exactly how long, but it was like 30-some seconds. Wow. And they didn't realize that no human could scream that long. But of course, Jesus could.
Yeah.
And So the movie has flashbacks and flash forwards and things that are in his mind and dreams. And so for his dream state, I did electronic music for that. And while that was going on, they kept trying to figure out a way to fill that scream that they had already shot.
Yeah.
So I worked real hard trying to make a scream, and right before the dubbing, I got something that sort of worked, and it sort of got around that I could make a scream sound like that.
Oh, cool.
And then there was a film it was a TV film, A Whale for the Killing, with Peter Strauss, and I made the sound of a whale. Because there was one whale that was in a lagoon.
Sure.
And they really wanted it to have a whale on a soundstage. They didn't want water sounds and everything, because they were hydrophone sounds. And Peter Strauss actually has feeling, the whale and him sort of communicate back and forth.
Yeah.
And so that was the other thing that I did. The movie Blue Thunder. I don't know if you...
Oh, yeah.
And the helicopter had a silent mode.
Yeah.
And they needed a sound for a silent mode. If that makes
No, that makes sense.
If that makes sense. So that's something I ddid.
That's cool.
And then after that, I did that from the time I graduated CalArts, and I started really before, but until about 85, and then I started teaching full time.
Okay.
And I started teaching music and humanities and film.
Now, you have a bird. You have a parrot.
Yes, I do.
And I wanted to... You also have a record collection, and I wanted to give you this record.
Oh, my gosh.
How to Train Your Bird in Stereo. And just as a thank you for coming on the program and being a friend.
Oh, that is really special. And this is the kind of bird... It's a blue and gold macaw. That's exactly what this one, not that one, but this one is exactly what my parrot looks like. Well, that's really... Wow. Well, this is really intriguing.
Well, maybe you can learn something.
It's funny about at least what I've found with birds is they sort of learn what they want to.
Yeah.
And and she's done well for me.
Cool.
At that. Well, thank you so much. That's really special.
You're welcome.
Full range stereo and high fidelity. I remember when hi-fi first came out. It was mono, but it was when they started having separate systems, with a separate amplifier, and sort of some of the more professional, the big company, Macintosh and Crown, were making sort of home systems, and people were getting these real big speakers for their, huge speakers for their house. Hi-Fi's actually they're using the term again.
Are they?
I've seen that, which I think is interesting. Well, thank you so much. I'm anxious to hear this. I'm curious to see what Tiki will.